Today, I'm going to do another one of those straight talk videos. No fancy special effects, nor elegant narrative prose. I'm just going to have a straight talk about faintness, confirmation bias, and short exposure times. So, in the last few months, among other things, I've done a series of videos on why I think it's beneficial, if you possibly can, to use short exposure times. Now, this concept isn't novel to me. It's based on a concept that many astrophotographers have known and applied for a long time. The concept simply states that mostly what matters is the total integration time, that the subframe exposure time of the individual subs hardly matters. In other words, to produce a good final image, it hardly matters whether you shoot 10 hours worth of 30-second subframes, 60-second subframes, 120-second subframes, 5-minute subframes, or whatever. And this approach runs quite contrary to the way some astrophotographers, ostensibly experts, have been teaching new astrophotographers that they must shoot subs, wherein they've been teaching them that each individual sub must be exposed until the histogram is fully filled out with a light curve, which fundamentally treats each individual subframe as if it were a complete exposure in and of itself. But as I've demonstrated in previous videos, that really is treating subframe shooting as if it's individual image shooting and then putting the individual images together. With subframes, we really don't need to do that, as anybody in particular who does lucky imaging knows. If you shoot lucky imaging, you're lucky to get a histogram showing anything at all. Your entire light curve is going to be to the left side of the histogram. Since producing those videos, I've gotten some interesting commentary by a small number of persons, and there's even been one very interesting video response made to that. Now, the person who made that video, I'm not going to mention his name because he was also polite, and we have agreed on some things and disagreed on other things in the past. That's fine. I'm just going to say we're going to disagree on this. However, the nature of the disagreement continues to perplex me, because what you've been seeing this whole time that I've been talking, well, to be frank, this is the evidence that shooting short exposure times works. Every single image that you've seen pop up in the entire time that I've been talking has been shot using short exposure times. Long integration times, to be sure. Typically, the minimum integration time that I would shoot any image for is 10 hours, and I aim for 20 and 30 and 40 in some cases, especially with extremely faint objects such as deep field targets. But as far as subframe exposure time, I rarely ever shoot more than 60 seconds subframe exposure time. There may be some hypothetical situation where I might want to, but I haven't yet encountered that, not even when shooting deep field objects. Deep field objects, I imagine most of you already know, but I'll explain it anyway, are objects in the distant cosmos, and I have photographed objects over 20 billion light years away. That's halfway across the observable universe using short subframe exposure times. Now, before I go any deeper into this, I should differentiate short subframe exposure time from lucky imaging, which was, I would say, was popularized pretty successfully by Astrobiscuit, who has a remarkable channel in astrophotography. He only produces a video every few months, which is a shame. I get it, because he has such high production values, and his videos are just, they're wonderfully entertaining and very informative. But I'd say he's probably done more to popularize lucky imaging than anybody else. And lucky imaging is an exposure technique of extremely short subframe exposure times of 2 seconds to very often tiny fractions of seconds. And the idea with lucky imaging is to shoot thousands and thousands of subframes in a single night, and keep only a small percentage of those subframes, only the ones that are minimally impacted by movements of the atmosphere, and then stack those to create a very clear object. It's a very effective technique, but it's also very wasteful. It's not uncommon when shooting short subframe exposure times to discard as much as 99% of your subs. But the lucky imaging technique uses such short exposure times that it requires its own techniques. By short subframe exposure time, I am describing anything 300 seconds down to the lucky imaging limit of 2 seconds. For myself, I almost always shoot at 60 seconds, and I don't want to make it sound like 60 seconds is a magic number. It works for my particular rig and my skies. If you were to adopt a short subframe exposure time technique, you'd want to find the exposure time for your rig and your skies. It was interesting to me how vehemently some persons felt against short subframe exposure times. Not many, most people seem to be perfectly happy with those videos, but there was a very small number of persons, less than 10, I didn't count, who really hated the idea of subframe exposure time. One of them I actually had to block from access to the channel because he was really angry about the concept. And in his case, it was particularly interesting because I know he has a wide aperture telescope, in fact, a 14-inch SCT, and a camera with which he could test the methodology. And he kept messaging me and telling me that the technique would not work. I replied to him that I knew he had a wide aperture telescope and a good camera, so go and try it himself on a few targets and then get back to me. And that seemed to set him off even more, and it turned into a lot of passive-aggressive insults and accusations of lying about the methodology. Now, I spent a lot of my life in academia. I spent about 12 years of my life in university. I don't know if he's an academic, but I've seen academics who marry theories before, and they just are not going to accept evidence to the contrary, even if the evidence is clear as a bell. But that's not where I moved him from the channel. I simply removed him from the channel due to the insults he started spewing and the passive-aggressive actions. However, my background is science, and all I'm interested in the end is evidence. I'm interested in evidence more than I'm interested in theory. A lot of people in the scientific world toss around theory. But without evidence, theory is no better than an imaginary friend. So, for those few persons who remain adamantly convinced that there is no way you can shoot faint objects with short subframe exposure times, here's some evidence for you. This is an image of thousands of deep field objects known as the Coma Cluster. It's a fascinating area of the sky to shoot. There are incidents here of gravitational lensing, multiple quasars, and deep field objects here halfway across the observable universe. In fact, it is this region of the universe that led to the discovery of dark matter. There's a great article on this topic at the Sky at Night magazine called "Were it not for this cluster of galaxies, astronomers may never have developed the theory of dark matter" by Ian Todd. And this amazing little region of sky is once again going to become very useful for demonstrating the power of short subframe exposure time imaging to capture extremely faint objects. Hang on to your seats, because this won't take long. I'm using a brilliant application called What's in My Image to be found in the SETI Astro Suite, made by Frank Merrick. I think it's one of the most brilliant and promising set of tools out there, not only for developing astrophotography, but also for studying the images, doing actual science. What's in My Image can be used to search your images to reveal visible objects and invisible objects to be found within that region of the sky. It'll tell you what the objects are, give you key criteria, and you can use it to instantly link to the SIMBAD and other databases to get further information on those objects. Now, the faintest objects in this image will be distant galaxies and quasars, so I've used What's in My Image to search for them, and I have restricted the search only to visible objects. The first object we'll consider is a low surface brightness galaxy with a magnitude in the visible optics range of 20.42. I'll highlight that on the SIMBAD database so you can see the area I'm talking about. Let's go find another faint object captured in the image. Our next object is a galaxy with a visible magnitude of... Now, hold on to your hats and be ready for the shocker when I read this. A visible magnitude of 22.777. And with that, honestly, I could drop the mic because I've made my case. A point I'll come back to and explain in a moment. But let me just show you a few more such readings, just to confirm that these aren't odd flukes in the image. Our next faint, randomly chosen object of interest is a galaxy with a visible light magnitude of 20.25. Now, let's find another random faint galaxy. This one has a visible optics magnitude of 20.31. And while there are a lot more like this, and much fainter, I think one more to make the point. By the way, I'm only picking galaxies that I can actually see on my monitor. I don't know if YouTube compression or perhaps your own monitor quality will restrict your view of them, but I can see them plainly on my mini LED monitor, which has 1,000,000:1 contrast, which is one of the reasons it's so important, by the way, to use a good monitor. But this final galaxy has a visible optics magnitude of 21.5. Now, the next thing that always happens is I get somebody who still is doubting or angry about all of this, who says, well, the resolution in your image is terrible of those things. Yes, these are extremely distant objects, billions of light years away. And I'm going to zoom into that object using the Simbad database image, which was made with a professional observatory's telescope. Here we are, zoomed into the image on their own database. Unsurprisingly, when one image is an object billions and billions of light years away, it's not very big in the telescope and detail is slight, but it is there, a definitive signal against the background of darkness and noise. Let's take a moment and talk about confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is a cognitive shortcut where people selectively search for, interpret, favor, and recall information that confirms their pre-existing beliefs while disregarding contradictory evidence. It's a problem for everyone, scientists and laypersons alike. Believe me, I know. Like I said, I spent a dozen years of my life in academia. I've known, worked with, and studied with many scientists over the years. And any of us can get sucked into it. We get to believing something. That belief becomes comfortable, like an old pair of work boots that are broken in and fit you perfectly. We can come to argue for it and defend it and invest part of our pride in it. We can even become irrational about it. It can become an imaginary friend that we have to defend at all costs. Evidence is the defense against confirmation bias, and that's why I created the Sky Story Astro Bin. Because when I first started this channel, there were, again, not a lot, but some very vocal persons very angrily frequently telling me, you can't use layer-based developing to develop astrophotography. It doesn't work, and it definitely doesn't work better like you're claiming. Or you can't shoot short exposure time subframes for astrophotography because they won't capture all the information that's there. Or you need to shoot narrowband to get sharp images. And frankly, I could go on and on. A big part of why I created the Sky Story Astro Bin was to serve as a portfolio of evidence to the contrary of so many of the myths that circulate in the realm of astrophotography. And the next thing I know is going to rub some people in astrophotography wrong. But one of the reasons I get good images is because I've ignored a lot of the advice that I was told I had to go along with by quote-unquote experts in the realm of astrophotography. Not everyone, happily. In fact, not even the majority. There are many wonderfully knowledgeable and helpful experts out there floating around in the astrophotography community who would love to share their knowledge. But I have found that the angriest and most vocal persons in this field frequently are the ones that have very little idea what they're talking about. When I decided to get back into astrophotography after many years of hiatus from my university days, I was told by that angry group of persons I had to spend an enormous amount of money for a huge refractor if I wanted to shoot at high focal length, which obviously turned out not to be true. I'm extraordinarily happy with my SCT, not only for the quality of images that it gets, but also because it only costs 12.5% of what an equivalent refractor would have cost. That's right, 12.5%. I'm very happy that I decided to shoot in LRGB rather than narrowband. There were literally people telling me that if I didn't shoot in narrowband, I couldn't get sharp images. That's a whole different myth that I'll cover one of these days. I've been meaning to get around to that one for a while. But I know that myth does circulate, that you need to shoot narrowband to get sharp images. Narrowband does not give you sharper images. It gives you another kind of information. We'll come around to that one of these days. I was told that I needed to shoot at low focal length because due to atmospheric effects and tracking challenges, it would be frustratingly hard to get good images at high focal length. I think I've demonstrated that's wrong too. I've not only found it not very difficult at all to shoot in high focal length, but I've also been extremely happy with the quality of the images that I get. And so many times I was told by so many quote-unquote experts that I must not use layer-based developing for astrophotography because layer-based developing is incompatible. When, in point of fact, when one dismisses the noise of the nonsense and actually applies layer-based developing to astrophotography, not only does it prove to be very compatible, but it provides so much more control that I found the outcomes to always be superior, both in terms of the detail that can be pulled, as well as the quality of the color and the light and shadow. And strangely, somehow, despite the success of super short exposure time techniques like lucky imaging, myths continue to circulate quite adamantly throughout the astrophotography community among some persons that short subframe exposure times are bad. In Sky and Telescope magazine, there is an article called "What is the Faintest Object Imaged by Ground-Based Telescopes?" published in 2006. It notes that the faintest object imaged by the Hubble telescope at that time was magnitude 31. The Hubble can manage that because not only does it have excellent optics, but it's also shooting from orbit, so it doesn't have to contend with ground vibrations, atmospheric wavering, or light absorption. The article notes that from the ground, the faintest objects were shot by the Subaru telescope in Hawaii, which imaged objects down to magnitude 27.7. Then it notes that Canadian amateur astronomer Paul Boltwood used a 16-inch telescope, which has only 1/400th the Subaru telescope's light collecting capacity, and he managed to capture signal down to magnitude 24. The authors note that had Boltwood been shooting from Mauna Kea, where the Subaru telescope is, he probably would have been able to capture even fainter signal, and fainter still had he increased his integration time. Because quality of skies, light collecting capacity, aperture, and integration time all make significant differences in the collection of photons and revealing the information that's been captured. Due to the limitations of the Earth's atmosphere, the maximum magnitude that can be captured at sea level is 24 to 25. As you may recall, the faintest object shown in my image of the Coma Cluster was magnitude 22.77, very close to the atmosphere's optical limit. And I'll reiterate that that image only has 9 hours of total integration time. On top of that, it was only shot with a 203mm or 8-inch SCT. And I should note there that I did not do a thorough search to see what is the faintest object in the image. What's in my sky does not do that kind of search, and there are thousands of objects in that image, so I didn't search everything. There may well yet be something fainter in there. For nearly a year, ever since I began that deep field project, I've been wanting to get back to it because my goal was to put 40 hours total into it, but the weather just hasn't cooperated. But I can't help but wonder what faint objects would have been revealed had I been able to double or triple the integration time. Maybe we'd see magnitude 23 or 24 already. What I do know is the hard evidence is that catching such faintness with short exposure subframe times is possible. And not only is it possible, but anybody can test this. If they simply use a telescope of similar aperture and a monochrome camera using luminance or LRGB filters and go to a dark sky site of Bortle 2 or better, then they should be able to repeat this and get similar outcomes. And I heartily invite anybody and everybody to try, because above all, it'll be fun. Imagine the joy of discovering that your telescope rigs can capture faintness beyond perhaps what you dared to imagine, and realizing the sky overhead is suddenly open to you, to image, to explore, to come to understand. A modern telescopic rig opens the mind's eye to all of that, to all the hidden light in a vast cosmos just overhead. But for those who refuse to accept the evidence here, who seem to angrily obsess over the notion that, nope, one must shoot long subframe exposure times to capture very faint objects, rather than showing me another video or more arguments about why you believe that it can't be done, or calling names as a couple of you have done, why don't you just go out there and experiment? Otherwise, as far as I'm concerned, I'm just up against confirmation bias, and frankly, I have exactly no time for it. For everybody else, I hope you have a blast doing astrophotography, and I hope these techniques help you to improve your ability to do astrophotography by taking advantage of the many benefits that shooting shorter subframe exposure times allows. And regardless, the key things are have fun and learn something. So above all, have a blast getting out there and shooting the sky.